Welcome to Growth Listen, where your growth happens by listening. Here, we dive into the minds of successful entrepreneurs, explore powerful strategies, and uncover lessons that can help you take your life, career, and business to the next level. Today, we're exploring How to Make a Few $1 Billion by Brad Jacobs, a book that reveals the principles, strategies, and mindset that helped Jacobs build multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. Over the next 35 minutes, we'll break down the key lessons, from spotting hidden opportunities and raising capital to building strong teams, executing with precision, and learning from failure. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a business enthusiast, or someone looking to think bigger in life, this summary will give you actionable insights to apply immediately. So, sit back, listen closely, and let's start your journey towards smarter growth and greater opportunities. Chapter 1: The Billionaire Mindset. Brad Jacobs begins his book with a simple but powerful truth. Making a few $1 billion doesn't start with money. It starts with the way you think. Before he ever raised capital, bought companies, or built industry leaders, he trained his mind to see the world differently. Jacobs explains that success at the highest level isn't about luck. It's about cultivating habits of curiosity, persistence, and clarity of thought. He didn't come from a billionaire family. He wasn't handed a ready-made empire. Instead, he made a habit of asking questions most people ignored. Why do certain industries remain overlooked? Why do competitors repeat the same mistakes? Why are big opportunities often hiding in plain sight? He calls this mindset pattern recognition. It's the ability to look at industries and spot inefficiencies that others miss. For example, he noticed that some industries were highly fragmented, meaning they were filled with many small companies, but no clear leader. Waste management, equipment rental, and logistics were all like this. In those industries, a disciplined entrepreneur could buy, consolidate, and integrate those smaller players into one dominant company. That's exactly what Jacobs did, again and again. But pattern recognition is not enough. Jacobs stresses that intellectual curiosity is the fuel behind it. He has always been a voracious learner, diving deep into unfamiliar industries, studying everything from customer pain points to financial structures. He wasn't afraid to look like a beginner. He asked what others might consider dumb questions, and those questions often led to billion-dollar insights. Another element of his mindset is persistence. Jacobs admits that he has failed, made wrong bets, and been criticized along the way. But he views setbacks as temporary. Each mistake is data. Each challenge is training for the next opportunity. Where others see failure as a wall, he sees it as a detour sign pointing to a smarter path. He also speaks about the importance of patience. Building billion-dollar companies isn't about chasing quick wins. It takes time to study industries, raise capital, find partners, and execute strategy. In a world obsessed with instant results, patience becomes a competitive advantage. Finally, Jacobs highlights adaptability. Business landscapes shift. Technologies change. Markets evolve. The best entrepreneurs don't cling to their first plan when reality proves it wrong. They pivot, adjust, and keep moving forward with a clear long-term vision. The lesson of this first chapter is simple but profound. Before you can build massive companies, you must build the right mindset. Curiosity, persistence, patience, and adaptability are the foundation. Without these, even the best strategies will crumble. With them, even a beginner can spot billion-dollar opportunities. And so, Jacobs leaves us with an idea. Wealth is built first in the mind, long before it appears in the bank account. If building a billion-dollar business begins with mindset, then what comes next? How does someone move from just seeing opportunities to actually seizing them and turning them into real companies? Chapter 2: Spotting Opportunities Others Miss. In the previous chapter, Brad Jacobs explained that the billionaire journey begins in the mind. But mindset alone is not enough. You need to apply it to the real world. In Chapter 2, Jacobs reveals how he consistently found billion-dollar opportunities in places where most people weren't even looking. He calls this ability seeing the invisible. It's not magic. It's not guessing. It's about analyzing industries carefully and recognizing patterns that others ignore. Jacobs explains that big opportunities often hide in plain sight, but most people dismiss them because they seem boring, unglamorous, or too fragmented. Take his early move into waste management. When he first studied the industry, it wasn't flashy. Few ambitious entrepreneurs were excited about garbage collection. But Jacobs saw something different. A vital service that every city needed, delivered by hundreds of small, inefficient companies. He recognized that by consolidating them, streamlining operations, and scaling up, he could create a national powerhouse. That insight became the foundation for his first billion-dollar success. He repeated the same process later in equipment rental. Again, he found an industry that was highly fragmented, filled with small local players who couldn't compete on scale. By acquiring and integrating these businesses, Jacobs built a giant in that sector. And then came logistics. When most people thought about trucking or freight brokerage, they saw low margins and tough conditions. Jacobs, however, saw the backbone of global commerce. With e-commerce booming and supply chains becoming more complex, logistics was becoming more essential than ever. He moved in, built XPO Logistics, and turned it into another multi-billion-dollar company. So what's the lesson here? Jacobs explains that spotting opportunities isn't about chasing whatever is trendy. In fact, it's often the opposite. He advises entrepreneurs to look at industries where others aren't paying attention. Ask, is the industry essential? Does society rely on it? Is it fragmented? Are there too many small players with no dominant leader? Is it scalable? Can a bigger, smarter player create efficiencies and expand nationwide or globally? Jacobs emphasizes that you don't have to reinvent the wheel to make billions. You don't always need a brand new invention or disruptive technology. Sometimes, the biggest wins come from taking something old, messy, or unorganized and making it better, bigger, and more efficient. He also highlights the role of deep research. Before entering any industry, he would spend months, sometimes years, reading every report, interviewing people, studying financials, and mapping out the ecosystem. This relentless curiosity helped him see what others missed. In Jacobs's words, if you want to make a few $1 billion, don't just follow the crowd. Look where the crowd isn't looking. The big idea of Chapter 2 is clear. Opportunities are everywhere, but they reveal themselves only to those willing to look deeper. Most people dismiss the ordinary, but extraordinary entrepreneurs recognize the gold hiding inside the ordinary. Now that we know how to spot opportunities, another question arises. Once you find a promising industry, how do you actually take control of it? How do you scale up fast enough to dominate, instead of being crushed by competition? Chapter 3: The Power of Roll-ups and Acquisitions. In the earlier chapters, Brad Jacobs talked about mindset and how to spot industries that others overlook. But once you've found a promising field, how do you actually build something massive inside it? For Jacobs, the answer was acquisitions, specifically, a strategy known as a roll-up. A roll-up is when you buy many small companies in a fragmented industry and combine them into one larger, more efficient business. This was the blueprint Jacobs used again and again across different sectors to create billion-dollar enterprises. He explains that fragmented industries are like puzzles scattered across the floor. Each piece on its own is small and weak, but when you put the pieces together, you build something powerful. In waste management, equipment rental, and logistics, Jacobs used this exact playbook. Here's how it worked. 1. Identify the right targets. He looked for small and mid-sized companies with strong customer bases but limited resources. Many of these businesses were family-owned, profitable, but not able to scale. 2. Acquire them systematically. Instead of buying one or two and stopping, Jacobs would acquire dozens, sometimes hundreds, of businesses in the same industry. 3. Integrate them carefully. This is where most roll-ups fail. Simply owning a collection of companies doesn't create value. You have to bring them together. Jacobs focused on standardizing systems, streamlining operations, and building a unified brand. 4. Create economies of scale. By combining many smaller companies into one, he could negotiate better deals with suppliers, reduce overhead costs, and provide better service to customers. 5. Dominate the market. With scale and efficiency, his companies often became industry leaders, leaving competitors behind. Jacobs warns that acquisitions are not just about money. They are about execution. Many people think buying businesses automatically makes you richer, but in reality, poor integration can destroy value. That's why his teams always paid close attention to culture, leadership, and systems during a roll-up. A powerful example of this strategy was XPO Logistics. Jacobs started with just an idea, then quickly raised capital and went on an acquisition spree. Within a few years, he had bought over a dozen companies, each bringing new capabilities, like trucking, last-mile delivery, and freight brokerage. Piece by piece, he built a logistics giant that could serve customers across the entire supply chain. What made Jacobs' approach different was his discipline. He didn't just buy companies for the sake of growth. He chose targets carefully, always asking, will this acquisition strengthen the overall platform? Will it create more value when combined with the others? Another key lesson he shares is that acquisitions require trust and credibility. To raise the capital needed, investors had to believe in his vision. To convince owners to sell their companies, they had to trust he would treat their businesses with care. Without credibility, the roll-up strategy collapses. The big idea of this chapter is that acquisitions, when done wisely, can accelerate growth far beyond what's possible organically. You don't have to build everything from scratch. Sometimes the smartest move is to buy, combine, and create something stronger. Jacobs closes the chapter by reminding us, acquisitions are a tool. They can make you billions if executed with discipline, but they can also ruin you if done recklessly. Now that we understand how acquisitions can rapidly build billion-dollar companies, another question comes to mind. How do you actually raise the massive amounts of money required to fund those acquisitions in the first place? Chapter 4. Raising and Allocating Capital Wisely. Brad Jacobs showed us how acquisitions and roll-ups can transform fragmented industries into billion-dollar businesses. But there's a hidden challenge behind that strategy: money. Buying companies requires enormous amounts of capital, and few entrepreneurs have billions sitting in their bank accounts. So, how did Jacobs finance such massive moves? The answer lies in his ability to raise capital and allocate it wisely. Jacobs explains that capital is the oxygen of a business. Without it, even the most brilliant ideas suffocate. With it, opportunities can grow into giants. But capital doesn't appear out of thin air. You have to earn the trust of investors, lenders, and partners. And once you have it, you must deploy it with care, building credibility with investors. One of Jacobs' greatest strengths was credibility. From the beginning, he worked hard to establish a reputation for honesty, discipline, and results. Investors don't just put money into industries, they put money into people. They look at the entrepreneur's track record, character, and vision. Jacobs recalls how, early in his career, he spent months building relationships with investors before asking for a single dollar. He listened to their concerns, explained his strategy clearly, and answered every question with transparency. By the time he was ready to raise money, Investors felt they knew him and could trust him. He also points out that raising capital is not about flashy presentations or wild promises. It's about being realistic. Investors respect entrepreneurs who acknowledge risks, admit what they don't know, and still show a logical plan for success. The art of allocation. Raising money is only half the story. Allocating it wisely is what separates great builders from reckless gamblers. Jacob stresses that capital should be treated as a precious resource. Every dollar has to work hard. In his companies, he avoided wasteful spending and focused on high-return investments. For example, when he acquired companies, he didn't just throw money at them. He carefully evaluated whether the acquisition would strengthen the overall platform, create synergies, and produce long-term growth. He also resisted the temptation to overpay. Many entrepreneurs, caught up in excitement, buy companies at inflated prices. Jacobs, however, believed discipline and valuation was non-negotiable. Paying too much can destroy shareholder value, no matter how strong the business looks on paper. Balancing debt and equity. Another important lesson Jacobs shares is about balancing debt and equity. Debt can accelerate growth, but too much debt creates fragility. Equity provides stability, but too much equity dilutes ownership. The best strategy is to balance the two, ensuring that the company has enough flexibility to weather downturns while still keeping growth potential high. Jacobs often structured deals with both forms of financing, using debt for leverage but relying on equity to keep investors confident. This balance helped his companies grow aggressively without collapsing under financial pressure. Long-term relationships. Jacobs emphasizes that capital raising is not a one-time event. It's a long-term relationship. Investors who support you today will be more likely to back you tomorrow if you deliver results and maintain trust. Many of the same investors funded multiple ventures of his career because he always delivered on his promises. In short, money follows trust. And trust is built over years of discipline, transparency, and performance. The big lesson. The core takeaway from this chapter is clear. Raising and allocating capital is both an art and a science. You must be persuasive enough to attract billions in funding, but disciplined enough to spend every dollar wisely. In Jacobs's view, raising capital is not about greed, it's about responsibility. Every investor who gives you money is placing their trust in you, and your job is to protect and grow that trust. Now that we understand how Brad Jacobs raised and deployed massive amounts of capital, one question remains. Once you have the money and the acquisitions lined up, how do you make sure the company actually runs smoothly? How do you build the kind of team and culture that can turn strategy into reality? That's exactly what Jacobs explores in the next chapter. Chapter 5. Building Winning Teams and Culture. Brad Jacobs makes one thing very clear in this chapter. You can't build a billion-dollar company alone. No matter how sharp your strategy or how big your vision, at the end of the day, people make the difference. Billion-dollar businesses are built on the backs of talented teams and strong cultures. Jacobs admits that in his early days, he underestimated just how critical the right people were. Over time, he learned that hiring the wrong executives can set you back years, while hiring the right ones can transform a company almost overnight. The power of great executives. Jacobs's philosophy was to hire people who were better than him in their area of expertise. If he brought someone in for operations, finance, sales, or logistics, he wanted them to be world-class in that role, better than he could ever be. His job as the entrepreneur was not to do everything, but to assemble a team where every member was a star in their field. He often spent months searching for the right executives. When he found them, he gave them room to operate, but also held them accountable with clear goals and metrics. He describes leadership as a balance between empowerment and accountability. Culture eats strategy. One of the strongest lessons Jacobs repeats is that culture is more powerful than strategy. A company with a brilliant strategy but a toxic culture will fail. But a company with a strong, positive culture can execute even an average strategy at a high level. At XPO Logistics, for example, Jacobs worked hard to create a culture of performance, transparency, and collaboration. He wanted employees to feel like owners, not just workers. He emphasized open communication, rewarded initiative, and celebrated achievements. Jacobs points out that culture starts at the top. Leaders set the tone by how they act every single day. If leaders cut corners, employees will too. If leaders value honesty, hard work, and innovation, the organization will mirror that behavior. The role of humility. Another surprising lesson Jacobs shares is the importance of humility in leadership. Billion-dollar companies are complex, and no one person has all the answers. Leaders who pretend they do often end up making costly mistakes. Jacobs made it a practice to listen carefully to his team, encourage debate, and change course if someone had a better idea. He believes humility is not weakness, it's strength. A humble leader earns trust and builds loyalty because people know their voices matter. Building for the long term. When building teams and culture, Jacobs always thought long term. He wasn't just hiring people for a project. He was building a leadership structure that could scale with the company. He avoided quick fixes and instead focused on finding leaders who could grow with the business as it expanded from millions to billions. He also knew when to act quickly if someone was the wrong fit. Hanging onto the wrong person for too long, he explains, is one of the most painful and costly mistakes leaders make. The wrong executive can poison a culture, slow down execution, and demotivate others. The big lesson. The core message of this chapter is simple. Companies don't build themselves, people do. Strategy and capital are useless without talented people to execute them. The stronger your team and culture, the higher your chances of building something lasting. Jacobs writes, "I'd rather have an average idea with a great team than a great idea with an average team. The first will succeed. The second will fail." Now that we know how crucial people and culture are, another question arises. Once you have the right team and culture in place, how do you keep the company moving in the right direction year after year? What keeps billion-dollar businesses from losing focus or falling apart as they grow? Chapter 6: Vision, Execution, and Adaptability. Brad Jacobs reminds us here that building a massive company is not a straight road. It's more like a winding mountain path with sudden turns, steep climbs, and occasional dead ends. To navigate it, a leader needs three things: a compelling vision, the discipline of execution, and the flexibility of adaptability. Vision, the compass that guides. Every successful company starts with a vision. But Jacobs clarifies that vision is not just a dream or a slogan. It's a clear picture of the future you want to create. Without vision, a company drifts. With it, even the toughest challenges make sense. For Jacobs, vision wasn't about creating something flashy. His visions were practical and industry transforming. In waste management, his vision was to take a local service and scale it into a national leader. In logistics, it was to build a one-stop shop for global supply chains. He emphasizes that vision must be both inspiring and grounded. If it's only inspiring but unrealistic, people won't believe in it. If it's realistic but uninspiring, people won't rally around it. The right vision strikes both chords. It excites people and makes logical sense. Execution, the engine that moves. Vision without execution is just a dream. Jacobs stresses that execution is what separates entrepreneurs who talk big from those who actually build big. Execution means setting clear priorities, breaking down large goals into smaller actions, and relentlessly tracking progress. At his companies, Jacobs was known for his obsessive focus on metrics. He He wanted to know exactly how each part of the business was performing, and if something wasn't working, he wanted to know why. He also stresses discipline and execution. Many leaders get distracted by new ideas or sudden opportunities, but great execution requires focus. You have to finish what you start, refine it, and scale it. Adaptability, the survival skill. Even with the best vision and flawless execution, no plan survives reality unchanged. Markets evolve. Competitors fight back. Technology disrupts. Jacobs highlights that adaptability is the difference between companies that thrive and those that vanish. For example, when he was building XPO Logistics, the company initially focused heavily on truck brokerage. But as e-commerce exploded, Jacobs saw the need to pivot into last-mile delivery and contract logistics. Instead of clinging to the original plan, he adapted, made acquisitions in those areas, and positioned XPO to ride the e-commerce wave. Adaptability, however, does not mean chasing every trend. It means being open to new information, listening to the market, and adjusting when it truly matters. Balancing the three. Jacobs describes building a business as a constant balancing act between vision, execution, and adaptability. Too much vision without execution leads to failure. Too much execution without vision leads to short-term gains, but no lasting growth. Too much adaptability without discipline leads to chaos. The great leaders, he explains, hold all three together. A clear vision for direction, disciplined execution to make progress, and adaptability to adjust when the path changes. The big lesson. The message of this chapter is that billion-dollar success is not built on one strength. It's built on the harmony of these three forces. Vision gives you purpose, execution gives you progress, and adaptability gives you resilience. Jacobs sums it up like this. A company is like a ship. Vision is the map, execution is the engine, and adaptability is the rudder. Without all three, you're lost at sea. Now that we understand how vision, execution, and adaptability fuel billion-dollar growth, another question arises. What about the personal side of this journey? Beyond strategy and business models, what lessons has Brad Jacobs learned about himself, about failure, and about staying grounded while building empires? Chapter 7. Lessons from the Journey. Brad Jacobs concludes his book by turning inward. Up to this point, he has walked us through mindset, spotting opportunities, acquisitions, capital, teams, and execution. In the final chapter, he emphasizes that building billions isn't just about strategy. It's also about character, resilience, and personal growth. Learning from failure. Jacobs is candid about the failures he faced. Not every acquisition succeeded. Not every strategy played out as planned. But he views failure not as an endpoint, but as a source of insight. Each setback, he explains, carries lessons that no classroom can teach. He encourages entrepreneurs to embrace mistakes as data points. Instead of fearing failure, analyze it. Why did it happen? What could have been done differently? The ability to learn quickly from missteps is a hallmark of every successful billionaire he knows. Staying grounded. Despite enormous wealth and success, Jacobs emphasizes humility. He reminds readers that money alone does not define achievement. True success comes from the impact you create, the people you inspire, and the lasting value you build. Jacobs shares that he constantly reminds himself, wealth is a tool, not a goal. It can open doors to opportunities and influence, but without purpose, it is hollow. Maintaining perspective, staying connected to your values, and remembering where you started are critical to sustaining success. Continuous learning. One of Jacobs's most important principles is lifelong learning. Billion-dollar businesses evolve rapidly, and markets change constantly. To stay ahead, he advises cultivating curiosity, reading extensively, and observing industries closely. He views learning as both a personal discipline and a business advantage. Jacobs also points out that innovation often comes from learning across industries. Seeing patterns in one sector can inspire solutions in another. In other words, the more you understand the world, the more opportunities you can recognize and seize. Actionable principles. Jacobs closes with practical guidance for aspiring entrepreneurs and business leaders. 1. Build a strong foundation and mindset. Curiosity, persistence, and adaptability are your most valuable tools. 2. Look where others aren't looking. Opportunities hide in ordinary industries. Learn to see patterns and inefficiencies. 3. Leverage strategic acquisitions. Buying, consolidating, and integrating can accelerate growth more than starting from scratch. 4. Raise and deploy capital wisely. Treat investor trust as sacred and allocate resources carefully. 5. Invest in people and culture. Your team is your greatest asset. Hire smart, empower them, and maintain a strong culture. 6. Combine vision, execution, and adaptability. All three are essential to building lasting success. 7. Embrace failures and keep learning. Every misstep is a lesson. Every success is a stepping stone. Moving forward in life. Jacobs encourages readers not to focus solely on wealth, but on the skills and mindset that create opportunities. You don't need billions immediately. Start by applying these principles in small ways. Notice inefficiencies around you and think about solutions. Take calculated risks in your work or business. Learn continuously, read broadly, and stay curious. Build meaningful relationships and cultivate trust. Reflect on failures and adjust your strategy. By internalizing these lessons, anyone can move toward building not just wealth, but influence, impact, and long-term success. Brad Jacobs' journey teaches us a powerful truth. Making billions is not about luck or being in the right place at the right time. It's about thinking differently, spotting opportunities, acting deliberately, and constantly learning. From cultivating the right mindset to identifying overlooked industries, raising and deploying capital wisely, building strong teams, and executing with adaptability. These are the principles that transform ordinary businesses into extraordinary empires. The lessons from this book are not just for entrepreneurs aiming for billions. They're for anyone who wants to think bigger, act smarter, and create lasting impact in their career or life. Start small, stay curious, and apply these strategies consistently. Over time, they compound in ways that can lead to remarkable outcomes. If you found this summary helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with anyone who wants to learn the secrets behind building massive success. Also, I'd love to hear from you. Comment below and tell me which book you want me to summarize next. Your suggestions will guide the next audiobook journey.